You're listening to Shoe In, covering the ins and outs of all things footwear, from sneakers to heels, loafers to slippers, and every type of shoe in between. Brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. And now your footwear insiders, Matt Priest and Andy Polk.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Shoe In Show, the Footwear Industries podcast. Thanks for joining us this week. Matt, as we're thrust into 2022, another year of the great unknown, the great reemergence, and then the great, going back into the cave because of Omicron, and then hopefully coming back out in the springtime. I kind of feel like that hedgehog or the groundhog on Groundhog's Day to, one to pull me up and hopefully I see my shadow and winter's over and this is all over. But two, it feels like, some of this is a little bit repetitive for what we've seen before. So
yeah, it is, man. And it's gospel in business that business loves certainty, whether it's good news or bad news. Businesses want to plan for either or. So Andy, we're in this super uncertain time. So I think our next guests will help us kind of digest where we're headed. And just based on the business model of his business, Greg Petro, who is the CEO of First Insight, really helps build predictability into a business model that helps our companies thrive. And so, Greg, thanks for coming on Shoe In Show. You're one of the few, the proud, the frequent guests of our program. So if you came on once, you want to come back, we always, Andy and I count that as a win. So thanks for coming on Shoe In Show today.
Excited to be here, Matt. Thanks for having me. And Andy, good to speak to you again as well.
So one of the things we want to talk about, Greg, is around sustainability. That is kind of it is the hot button issue that's out there and that many of our companies are working towards and moving towards. It is the hottest issue for FDRA. Andy does amazing work leading that vertical within our organization. And the brand engagement on it is just through the roof. And we've even partnered with First Insight to help glean consumer insights as to how they view sustainability within our industry. But as it continues to grow in importance, what do you think are the biggest implications for retail and footwear that you're seeing through all of this?
Well, I think it's a great question. Obviously, the one constant is change in the environment. And one thing we're seeing is the rapidity of that change is only increasing. The velocity of change is happening at a higher rate. Consequently, the data that we share has a shelf life to it. And recently we did a study on sustainability, and it was bookmarked from a study 2 years ago that we tried to get a baseline for. And our anticipation was that things would evolve, obviously, and change, but we didn't anticipate how quickly that would change. And speaking to that specifically, one of the findings that I found most interesting was the speed of change by generation in the desire for sustainable products and the willingness for them to pay within generations. So as you imagine, 2 years ago, Gen Zs, and we were talking about this, were leading the charge. Really the generation who were understanding the need for sustainability from their voice and their perspective. And we saw that also in the millennial group and Gen X, and, lagging as the generations went on. However, this year when we did the study and the findings were that all of them are the same. And in fact, not only are they the same, but they've accelerated in their willingness to accept higher prices for sustainability products and authenticity around that sustainability and an understanding around that. So the need for companies to understand how their customers have changed is dramatic, number one. And then the opportunity that unpacks is pretty substantial. So we've seen in one footwear company alone the ability for them to using the platform to reduce samples by 70%, at the same time shortening their time to market by 40% and driving additional sales. So when you do it right and it's authentic to the brand, it resonates with the customer and you can have a huge success.
I think what's really interesting too is that, for a long time we talked about sustainability as a cost. And I think a lot of brands are starting to come down and realize that sustainability is part of our innovation strategy and our innovation push, both in terms of operations, but also product, right? New product materials, types, et cetera. And we're a little bit benefited by the inflation in the economy now, where all the prices are rising across the board, right? So it's unfortunate in many ways that we see this high inflation, but it does allow us to reimagine how we add value to product and how we fold it in. And I think that's really First Insight's very unique in that spot where you can actually show your product in your development cycle to consumers and get feedback in real time on the material types, on the colorways, on the price points, talking a little bit about the story that the brand has, et cetera. And to Greg's point, talking about being able to know what's going to sell before you make it. So you don't have that waste. You don't have to off-channel your shoes or incinerate your shoes. So we talk about sustainability around that. That's really important. And Greg, I know, when we talk about sustainability, it's now a broader topic as well. It's not just environmental, but we have social and government issues with that too, around social justice issues or worker right issues. And so, as far as your platform and your ability to test those messagings as well, I'm wondering what you're seeing from the brands and retailers that work with you guys. How are they using you guys, and how are they talking to consumers about those topics to get insights to better make business decisions and better products?
Yeah. And Andy, you are spot on. I mean, ESG is a much broader initiative, right? And it is now a large part of every organization that we're talking to, no matter what size the organization is. And I think when you step back from it, I mean, we've talked, as you mentioned, about the sustainability of reducing waste. But when you think about social and governance for just a minute, most organizations think about it in many different ways, but I'll give you, I think, the perspective of which we can support and are seeing companies use it. So when it comes to social, and this is an interesting one, I've written about it several times in some pieces that I've put out there on Forbes and other areas, but about offensive products and offensive designs, or waste when an organization makes a bad decision. We've seen within our tool the ability to test messaging, to engage the consumer in a very authentic way on the social platform or the social messaging. And one aspect of that is that engagement becomes very organic. I kind of say sustainability and ESG are the new organic, right? Except it tastes better than when it first started. And it's the right thing to do. It's kind of healthy for everybody, right? So that's one piece of it. But so I think understanding the messaging and how those are going to be placed. So an example, we had a shoe sandal style that went out, and there was a cultural mismatch, right, with their customer base. And they actually pulled the sandal. And because it was found by the groups that they were testing to be somewhat offensive, right? We have examples in bedding where a design was hidden within the design. The designers came up with a great, fabrication, but it had some elements to it that were offensive to people when you looked at the patterns. And it took a while, but the consumer was able to pick it up. So I think those ways of engaging organically the customer base to understand before you end up making a mistake and then putting that product out and then having to retract it and dispose of it to what you just
I
examined.
think
On the governance side, we're starting to see organizations engage consumers as a voice. And one of our advocacies is that you should have a seat in a boardroom for a customer, right? And basically allow them, a perspective. You have certainly marketing and operations and finance and all the other areas of an organization. But our point of view is, have you listened to the customer to understand what their perspective is about what you're trying to accomplish? So we see ESG very holistically, and the use of the platform as a mechanism, a listening tool to sit down and say, okay, there are many different ways beyond product testing, employee test engagement to understand all of the perspectives before you move forward in those decisions.
Yeah, I think that's really smart. I mean, we have a diverse and pluralistic society, more diverse by the day, and there's so many benefits that come with that. The great melting pot or mosaic that is the United States of America in our marketplace. But Greg, that means that we're not all aware of cultural sensitivities and ways in which product engages with different segments of the customer. And so as we're in this moment where the industry is trying to figure out the best way to diversify its own employee ranks, and it's particularly the C-suite, because I think my argument is always like, if you're serving a diverse community and you want to sell more shoes to that diverse community, then you need to have a diverse leadership, right? And it's good for business. It's the right thing to do. And I think having First Insight and that partnership provide those key consumer insights, if you will, in a more diverse nation and consumer base is really critical. Now, 2022 for you, Greg, and your team is like any other year. You guys are rocking and rolling already. You're dumping a lot. You're bringing a lot of new product to bear. Talk to us about your new initiatives and some of the platforms and other things that you're taking on in this new year and ways in which brands can engage with it.
Yeah, Matt, thank you. I mean, 2022 for us is a very exciting point. Last year, at the end of last year, 2021, which seems like a long time ago, but was just days away, we saw one of our largest code drops ever. That's, engineering geek terms for technology creation that has happened in our company's history since its inception. In fact, while under, the changes that we all took place with COVID and the onset of COVID back in early 2020, we started to collect information from the consumer. And at the same time, we made a strategic decision to double down in our R&D during that time and invest in our product and ourselves. So quite frankly, it allowed us to see the unfolding of great capabilities more than we ever have in our history in 2021. Our customers enjoyed that. And in fact, utilization grew over 20% organically, meaning our existing customers wanting to reach out to their consumers and their customers at large and listen to them more through capabilities that we were creating. And I think as we look into 2022, for us, it's an exciting time because while we expanded our growth quite substantively, and we're going to be doing lots of announcements around not only the new capabilities in ESG and sustainability, which we can spend a little time on, but also capabilities around planning for lots of different industries around the world. I think the key point for us is that we now have seen the natural unfolding of our platform use, not just on the product side, but and what we have called product experience from a consumer perspective, but the consumer experience, the brand, and the employee. And so now we have a natural platform for companies, whether it be a merchant, a marketer, a finance person, or an executive, wanting to reach out and understand different constituencies from different perspectives. And, that helps from everything from trade-off analysis, understanding when new products launch, halo and cannibalization effects for the first time ever on existing products, to new marketing segmentations, and a lot of work trying to understand, if I launch this assortment, how can I track the most number of customers, or on my existing customers, how do I penetrate deeper? So there's a lot to make us very excited in 2022. And hopefully our customers will continue to appreciate that, and certainly the market at large.
Yeah, I think what you guys are doing is kind of exactly where all the industry's headed, and other industries as well, right? We had for so many years we had conversation on price and look, and now we're having conversations with consumers around branding, right? Branding is so key now to trust, to engagement, to how people see the brand, to how they want to tell their friends about it. And all those things in your platform go beyond just the look and the price to how should we market this and who's the target audience. Because I think it behooves all of us to sit down every now and again and take a look and say, 5 years ago, our target audience was soccer moms. And who's our target audience today? Did it shift? Did it change? Because when we talk about all these consumer shifts, and I think sometimes we think, well, we're making the same product, and it's like, but who's using it? You may expect that a teenager is going to pick it up, and all of a sudden grandpa picks it up. We've seen some of that, right? It just catches on these weird kind of trends, in strange ways sometimes. And we just need the data and analytics to kind of better inform what we're doing. And I think that's why we're real believers in what you guys are doing, and why we're partnering again with you guys in 2022 to help the footwear industry better understand how to make sure they're in the right spots and saying the right stuff. It's not hard, but it is hard, right? Like,
It's so true. It is so true. Absolutely. Very difficult.
So, Greg, as we look at 2022 outlook, we always ask this towards the front part of the year. You work with a range of retailers, not just footwear, but across many other industries. What are some of the challenges you see coming up, or opportunities as it relates to our economic health and consumer spending power and willingness to spend?
Well, I think that it's a great question, Andy. Something that we all lament the beginning of the year and try to figure out. And to the earlier point, I think that Matt made, the more information that you have about understanding what is likely to happen, the more you can plan for it, right? I've always been a hockey fan, played hockey for many years, and I think about where the puck is going is way Wayne Gretzky used to talk about it. But the idea is that, look, we've been on a very good run for lots of reasons, and that even included how we as a industry came out of 2022. As we look towards the effects of the supply chain disruption, and now some of the effects of labor constrictions, right, and the disruptions that all of this is leading to. Once we get through some of these, I would call it bullwhip effects of bubbles, inventory gluts that are likely to occur in the early part of this year based upon transportation snafus that will work themselves out, and it's going to take some time. What becomes visible to us based upon, our customer base, which to your point is quite broad, and now is over, a couple of hundred retailers and brands globally, is we're seeing signs that are leading us to believe that the consumer is going to constrict, and that in general terms, the economic environment isn't going to be as positive as we've seen in the past. Now, does that mean necessarily that there's a recession ahead of us? I would say there's probabilities of that for sure. And if I were looking towards that, and my anticipation is, I would be very concerned pragmatically about that effect occurring across multiple aspects of our industry. There's certainly going to be different approaches, and we've been through this before, but certainly signs of that are happening across the globe, and I think will ultimately affect probably all aspects of the United States from an industry perspective, along with other areas of the globe. So that's one effect, and I think the part of the answer is going to be how can companies respond first to that inventory situation through their adjustment in pricing and not giving away the store by just lowering the price across the board, because I don't think that's going to be necessary. We saw a customer in COVID, while in COVID, closing stores and then opening, taking that excess inventory and doing a lot of what if around promotional strategies, BOGO, different types of BOGO offers, different discounts, and then ultimately identifying a way to give themselves 1,000 basis points in margin improvement. And I think that's going to be one effect that's going to help winners and losers, because inventory is going to flow even after the fiscal years have closed out. So there's some of that happening. But at the same time, the customer is going to change pretty dramatically in the next 12 months. And I don't know exactly how, but I do know that companies need to get an anticipation of what's likely to occur by involving them in that discussion, right? But I can tell you that the general terms that we're seeing are not necessarily positive. So I think without taking too much of a constrictive approach, I think companies ought to be far more conservative than they may have been. And in some cases where they have been conservative, they probably need to be a lot more aggressive to double down, just because the amount of time to get inventory and making sure it's the right piece at this point is because they're not going to get a second chance at it. So it's a little bit of a dicey game right now. And it's a unique situation. We've never come across this in my 35 years in doing this. It's been a while since you've seen a recession, but at the same time, you haven't seen it compounded by all the factors between a pandemic, supply chain disruptions, and everything else. So I would say it's a cautious approach into 2022.
Well, I think that's a good, I appreciate you saying that, because some people don't want to have any kind of negative news whatsoever, but the truth is the truth, right? And I think there's a lot of signs, as you say, but we see inflation increasing, so that's eating away any wage increases that we see. The government stimulus is running out, so that free money that's been in the economy for so long is not going to be there like we saw in 2022. And so if you keep having these COVID variants happening and the supply chain issues that you say, it's natural, I think, for people to hold on a little bit tighter to their wallet than they normally would. And I think, in a way, to basically describe it, when we look at our numbers internally at FTRA, we compare 2019, 2020, 2021, and it seems like a double tsunami, right? It goes really high, it goes really low. Right. So it's like, how do you make sense of this? But in essence, from 2020 to last year, 2021, we saw basically, anecdotally, basically every American buying an extra pair of shoes compared to the previous year. So I think what you're kind of saying is in 2022, they probably won't pick up that extra pair at the store. They're probably buying because they had to buy shoes, right. But they may not pick the extra pair up over the course of a year. And so people just need to make sure they're operationally sound. They need to do scenario planning in terms of their inventory and retail expectations, probably more than they have in the past, to have all those options on the table to make quick, decisive choices. And honestly, I think, and we talked about this every single time on this show, I don't know, every episode, but relationships matter, right? Those retail, right. The manufacturing, the supply chain, and, your customers matter. And you better start doubling down. And if you need to send out chocolates over Valentine's Day, or even in March, St. Patty's Day, you can get the Andes mints to get that green in. Then do that and make some enhance those relationships if you can.
Keep your friends close.
That's sure. Right.
Especially during, So you're absolutely right. I think the idea of what's happening in the industry, and hopefully governments don't overcorrect.
Yeah.
Because the variability, to your point, the swings have been pretty dramatic. And at the same time, as long as everybody can mediate and we can get ourselves into a normalized curve, I think that'll be a comfort zone for a lot of people. But that's where, to your point, sensitivity analysis, scenario analysis, and understanding what needs to happen or it can happen, and then the effects of that and how you would adjust accordingly are going to be massively important to whether or not they win or lose.
Excellent. Well, Greg, thank you so much for coming on today. We really appreciate your insights and analysis. And of course, folks you can Google First Insight. First Insight's on a lot of our Tuesday calls. Every time they have a report come out, Gretchen or one of the team members come on and brief us on what's happening and what they're seeing in real time. They'll be attending of a lot of our events this year. And so, if you have not got a demo of First Insight, contact me, contact Matt, Google First Insight, just get in touch with us so we can help set it up. You need to see the programming and what you can do to make sure you're making those right choices and building in what we just talked about, scenario planning, sensitivity plan, all these different things. How do you have all that at your fingertips to make better business decisions? Because I can tell you, Excel is not cutting it anymore in these triple tsunami environments we just talked about, up and down, up and down. And that's both supply chain and that's both with retail, just trying to track things and see where things are at. I think, honestly, we have a lot of people in our industry who make really good gut decisions, but I think there'd be less heartburn overall if you had better data to back up those decisions as well when you make those gut decisions. So, Greg, again, we appreciate you coming on and sharing your insights and what you guys are doing.
Thank you, Andy, and thank you, Matt. Always a pleasure and great seeing you. Wish you well, and have a great day.
Yeah, you too. And folks, as always, remember, shoeandshow.com is our website. All our episodes are on there. We encourage you to go back and listen to all these great insights and business tips from leaders across the industry and experts. If you're a first timer, please go back and check out that library. If you've been listening to us for a long time, we really appreciate it. Please share with a colleague or a friend about our show so that they can listen every single Monday and get tips to do their job a little bit better. That's what this show is all about. On behalf of Matt and the whole team at FDRA and Fanning, we appreciate you listening and staying engaged. And until next time, Shoe-In is out.
Shoe-In has been brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. For information about FDRA, visit fdra.org.